We're talking with Professors Matsuoka and Nakasone about this remarkable two-volume work on Asian American religious cultures. In the last segment, we invited the public, you, everybody, to come on September 24th, 1:30 to 4. There's a launch at this, and right down at the bottom, being a careful host, I found that this is at the Japanese Cultural and Community Center, 1840 Sutter Street, San Francisco, 1840 Sutter Street. And we urge you to attend. Now, Ron, give us some example. If I go into this, choose a faith or a part of a faith, and tell us what we're going to find here.
Yes, well, it's such a diverse thing. I should also mention, and Fumitaka also mentioned, but a part of this encyclopedia was also to include the Pacific Islanders. So there was one particular entry in there which I thought was exceptionally good, and it was the one on Hawaii, on Hawaiian religion, Hawaiian spirituality. And what we tried to do is we tried to get, at least I worked directly with the writer on that, Makana Paris. And he would write something, and I said, well, why is this taking so long? You know, I'm kind of getting anxious here. And he said, well, every time I write something, I take it to my elders and see if they approve of it. So that's why it took a long time. And I was really, and that was part of our philosophy, is we wanted to get into the living reality, I guess that's a term, of the faith tradition from an insider. You know, we scholars tend to be objective, and we don't get the flavor of or the flavor or the sense of the tradition. But so this was one example of how we try to get into the culture itself, onto the faith tradition by people who actually were devotees in the tradition.
Okay, so I mean, I'm opening here and I find something under Hawaii. I'm just going to read just a snippet so we get an idea. The aloha spirit is an idea that the people of Hawaii have a special connection to one another, the land, the culture, and the visitors. The connection is one of love, hospitality, and a forgiving, easygoing spirit in nature. Okay, well, that's many of us have been to Hawaii, so we understand that. But again, it's so detailed. Fumitaka, tell us more about this labor of love, obviously.
Sure. Just as Ron was talking about it, each national group of Asian Americans is so distinct, and distinct culture, history, and also religious understandings. Now, in the U.S., we talk about unity in diversity, right? That's basically the kind of national motto of what the nation building is all about. But for the Asian Americans, that is one thing that we recognize or acknowledge. At the same time, we have to deal with very distinct ways that we go about our lives. So what it means is that we are kind of caught between the narrative, the accepted narrative of the U.S. as a nation on the one hand, the very distinct background from which we come from on the other. So what happens is we get kind of caught between those two, the polar backgrounds, and we have to kind of negotiate what that really means.
Well, I know when we were talking before, you said something that fascinated me, that in terms of Asian religion and thought, it's more of a pathway, a way of living, more than sort of the doctrinal approach of Western religion. Can you two say something more about that, please?
Yes. The expression religion entered the Japanese vocabulary somewhere in the 1850s. Until then, they never had a word for religion. And the reason it came about was that the Japanese were negotiating with the Russians for some trade treaty, and there was a clause in there that said something about freedom of religion. And the Japanese had no notion of what that meant. And prior to that, of course, they had defined Buddhism as the way of the Buddha, or Confucianism as the way of Confucianism, and Taoism as the way for Confucianism, but never in a term of religion, because religion has a covenantal relationship between a deity, in case of the Abrahamic religions, an absolute being and humanity. But this is such a foreign idea to most Asians, East Asia, South Asia.
Oh, but when we talk, you're a Christian, so how do you translate this?
Yes, I talked about the in-between identity is the way that we approach life. And that also extends to the religious area as well. Many of us come from the country and the culture and religion that is really based on many different gods, many deities. Now in the U.S., and as Ron was talking about Abrahamic faith traditions, we're talking about one God. So what we get, that the in-betweenness is really the many gods as a formational background of Asian Americans and the Pacific Islanders on the one hand, one God tradition that I am Christian, but the Christians embrace. So what does it mean to hold those two in tension, at the same time commit ourselves to the one God religion in our own life context? I think that's really one of the issues that we struggle with.
What's the answer?
I use a particular term called amphibole that doesn't really mean anything, but at least we recognize that what we know about religion or the faith is it's not complete, that there is more to what even Christian faith is all about than what we already understand or articulate, and that the more part of the greater reality is something that we hold tentatively in our own faith position, even though we are committed to it. It's a very strange kind of position that we have.
The Japanese Nobel novelist Oe Kenzaburo had a term called peripheral people. We are peripheral people because we need to negotiate two histories, two languages, two religions, and we need to know two different sets of terms, cultures, and we have to negotiate. So his conclusion was that peripheral people are the most creative peoples because we learn and to know, we know relative values. We know relative values. Nothing is absolute.
Well, being from Tennessee, that's the way I felt about moving north. Our next guest is a Tennessean, too. Dr. Matsuoka, well, we thank you, sir, for your work on this and for being a guest. And Dr. Nakasone will be back in the fourth segment to wrap us up. Thank you. We're honored to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.